3 days away from the wedding you thought would define your happily ever after. The dream crashing down at a dinner table where the people smiling at you suddenly show their teeth. Being told to sign your future away, or lose the man you thought you knew. Everyone in the room laughing because they believe they've cornered you. Now imagine the silence when they realize they picked the wrong woman to underestimate. Before we continue, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel, because what happens next is a lesson no one should miss. My name is Olivia Brooks, and I was 29 when my fairy tale cracked wide open. I was 3 days away from marrying Justin Barrett, the man I believed was my forever. But his parents had other plans. They slid a prenup across the table as casually as pouring a glass of wine, their voices cold. "Sign here or the wedding is off." His sister cackled, certain I'd fold. They assumed my bank account was empty, that I'd cling to their wealth like a lifeline. What they didn't know was that I could buy their mansion twice over without blinking. My phone buzzed in the middle of that ambush. On the other end was Kimberly Ross, my lawyer and closest friend, her tone calm, almost amused. Whatever she said that night made me smile, and that smile wiped the smug looks clean off the Barretts' faces. They thought they were running the show, but the truth was, I had been quietly preparing for this fight my entire life. And when I walked out of that dinner, leaving their threats behind, I knew this wasn't just about love anymore. This was about respect, independence, and the one thing money can't buy, self-worth. I grew up far from the world of glass mansions and family empires. My parents were both nurses in Brooklyn, ordinary people who taught me extraordinary lessons. Stand on your own 2 feet, never let anyone put a price on your worth, and trust education to be the ladder out of limitations. We lived in a modest house where money was tight, but love was steady. I studied late into the night, chasing scholarships that would eventually carry me to NYU, where I majored in finance. It wasn't glamour that drove me, it was grit. By my junior year, my knack for spotting good investments doubled my savings. But the biggest turning point came in my final semester, when my aunt, my quiet, unassuming hero, passed away and left me $6 million earned through decades of sharp trading. No one would have guessed she was sitting on a fortune. I poured most of it into safe investments, allowing it to grow, and used part of it to launch a fintech app designed to help everyday people manage their money. By 27, my company's valuation hit $3 million, pushing my net worth close to $9 million. But I didn't flaunt it. I lived in a simple apartment in Michigan City, drove a Honda, dressed well, but never flashy. Only a handful of people knew my truth. My older sister, Olivia Brooks, a teacher in Chicago who was both my protector and sharpest advisor. My best friend and lawyer, Kimberly Ross, whose eagle eye caught every legal loophole. And Danielle Ross, my brilliant coder who kept our company's numbers airtight. They reminded me daily that hiding my fortune wasn't weakness, it was protection. Because people with agendas always come circling when money's involved. So when I met Justin Barrett at a financial literacy gala in Indianapolis, I wasn't thinking about wealth or legacies. He was charming in a way that felt disarming, genuine curiosity, not just trust fund polish. He asked about my app, about why I built it, about the people it was designed to serve. We bonded over long conversations about market gaps, community work, and even Chicago-style pizza. I thought I had found someone who saw me, not a dollar sign. Our first date was simple, a walk by Lake Michigan with coffee he brewed himself. And as weeks turned into months of hikes, late-night debates, and failed pasta recipes, I let myself believe in the kind of love that wasn't transactional. I thought we were building something equal. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. 6 months into dating Justin, he suggested I meet his family at their beach house in Michigan City. The night before we left, he grew quiet and admitted, almost reluctantly, that they were intense. He waved off my concern, but something in his hesitation stayed with me, a warning I tried to ignore. When we arrived, their home rose like a monument to wealth, glass walls gleaming over the lake, cedar beams polished to perfection. Inside, I felt instantly out of place in my simple dress, while every detail screamed of old money dominance. His father, George Barrett, greeted me with a handshake firm enough to feel like a test. His mother, Linda, smiled with polite venom, her scarf alone probably worth my rent. And Michelle, his sister, leaned against the counter with a smirk that told me she had already decided I didn't belong. Dinner was a performance. George talked about clients and deals, intentionally leaving me out of the conversation. Michelle mocked my app as cute, dismissing it like a side hustle. Linda's comments cut deeper. Subtle jabs about my background, my parents' jobs as nurses, the kind of digs disguised as small talk. I forced a smile, but it felt like sitting in a courtroom where the verdict was already written. Justin squeezed my hand under the table but stayed silent. He didn't challenge their condescension, and his silence spoke louder than any insult. That night, as I walked past the patio, I overheard Michelle on the phone, her voice dripping with arrogance. She mentioned a background check on me. My chest tightened. Suddenly, Angela's warnings about hidden agendas didn't feel like paranoia. They felt like prophecy. I texted Kimberly, my lawyer and best friend, telling her what I had overheard. Her reply was immediate and sharp. Keep your cards close. Don't let them see your hand. The Barretts thought they were studying me like a stock about to crash. But what they didn't realize was that I had been preparing my entire life for people like them. People who believed wealth was power and power was control. Their mistake was underestimating me. A year later, Justin proposed on a quiet beach near the dunes, slipping his aunt's sapphire ring onto my finger as the sunset burned across the horizon. My heart said yes before my mind could question the shadows still clinging to his family. I told myself love would be enough, that his parents' hostility would fade with time. But I was wrong again. Almost immediately, Linda inserted herself into every detail of our wedding planning. She pushed for a lavish country club venue in Michigan City, brushing off my idea of something smaller and more personal. She dismissed my choice of a lemon cake as sweet but not quite right, and instead ordered an extravagant showpiece from an upscale bakery. Even my sleek modern dress was ridiculed as budget-friendly. Each jab felt like a reminder that she didn't see me as worthy of the Barrett name. Justin tried to balance things, occasionally backing me up on small choices, but when it came to his mother's demands, he always urged compromise. "It's just easier," he'd say softly, his voice lined with strain. Easier for him, maybe, but every concession I made chipped away at the vision of the wedding I had dreamed of. Meanwhile, Michelle grew bolder. At brunch one morning, she casually mentioned that Justin's ex, Heather Clark, had been texting her about me, dropping insinuations that I was ambitious in ways that weren't flattering. It wasn't subtle, it was sabotage. And Justin's response was to shrug it off as sister stuff, leaving me to deal with the poison alone. Ryan Clark, one of Justin's colleagues, dropped his own warning into the mix. He hinted that Justin had been under pressure for months, that his family's expectations weighed heavily on him. It was clear the Barretts weren't just testing me. They were circling, waiting for me to slip. I paced my apartment that night, my phone pressed to my ear as I vented to Angela. She didn't sugarcoat her advice. "They're building a case against you. Don't let them box you in." Her bluntness was grounding. The next day, over coffee with Kimberly, I laid out my worries. She leaned forward, eyes sharp, and said what I didn't dare voice. "If they're digging into you, we dig into them." She introduced me to Scott Mills, a private investigator with a reputation for uncovering financial skeletons. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't playing defense anymore. If the Barretts wanted a fight, I was ready to hit back. The closer the wedding drew, the heavier the air felt. Linda tightened her grip on every detail, while Justin seemed to shrink under the weight of his family's expectations. He grew quieter, his reassurances sounding hollow. One evening, as we walked by the lake, he admitted they were pressuring him about our future. His voice trembled as he insisted, "They just want what's best." But I could hear the doubt buried in those words, and it gnawed at me. Later that night, I overheard Michelle on the patio, her voice sharp as glass. She laughed into her phone, saying, "The PI hasn't found anything big on her yet, but she's no match for us." Mom will handle it at dinner. My blood ran cold. Whatever they were planning, it was about to happen. 3 days before the wedding, Linda called with an invitation that sounded sweet on the surface, a family dinner to celebrate before the chaos. Justin was conveniently tied up with a client, leaving me to walk into the trap alone. The Barretts' dining room felt staged. The long, polished table, untouched plates, and 3 pairs of eyes fixed on me like predators circling prey. George slid a thick blue document across the table. "This is a prenup," he said flatly. "Standard for our wealth level. Signed tonight." I opened it, my finance brain firing on instinct. It wasn't a contract. It was a weapon. One-sided clauses stripped me of everything. In the event of divorce, I'd get nothing, no matter how long we were married. Worse, the language threatened to claim my company's intellectual property, the very app I had built from nothing. My voice stayed steady, even as heat burned in my chest. "This is one-sided," I said firmly. George waved a hand dismissive. Michelle laughed, calling my company a cute little app. Linda leaned forward, her tone sugar-coated but sharp. "If you love Justin, you'll sign. If not, walk away." The ultimatum was clear: sign or lose everything. But they didn't know the truth about me. They thought I was a desperate girl reaching for their son's fortune. They had no idea that I had already built a fortune of my own. I left that dinner with the prenup clutched in my hand, the Barretts' ultimatum echoing in my ears: sign or get out. Tears blurred the road as I drove back to my apartment, but underneath the hurt was a flame of fury. Minutes after walking through my door, I called Angela. My voice shook as I told her everything. She didn't hesitate. "Don't bend, Olivia. They're bullies. You're worth more than their game." Her words snapped something inside me into focus. I wasn't a pawn in their family empire. I was a woman who had built her own. The next morning, I slid the prenup across a diner table to Kimberly, who was already opening her laptop, her expression razor-sharp. "Send it to me," she said. "We'll tear this apart." Within hours, she had drafted a counter-agreement. Fair, balanced, protecting my $9 million in assets and locking down my app's intellectual property. But she wasn't finished. She leaned closer, her eyes glinting. "Scott found something. Offshore accounts, shady deals, money funneled through Cayman banks. We have leverage." For the first time since that dinner, I felt power shift back into my hands. Danielle called later that day, her voice full of certainty. "The app's valuation is holding strong at $3 million. They can't touch you." Her reassurance was like armor. I texted Angela. "They think I'm broke. I'm done hiding." Her reply came instantly. "Cut them loose if Justin's not all in. You're worth more." But I needed to hear it from him. That evening, I called Justin. He picked up on the first ring, his voice laced with fake concern. "Mom said you stormed out. What happened?" My chest tightened. "Your family ambushed me with a prenup." "You knew, didn't you?" Silence stretched before he admitted. "I meant to tell you. It's just tradition. Protects the family." My hands trembled. Tradition? It wasn't protection. It was control. In that moment, I realized the betrayal wasn't just his family's. It was his silence, his complicity. The man who claimed to love me had let them treat me like I was nothing. Justin's excuses crumbled the more he spoke. He told me I was overreacting, that the prenup was just a paper we could fix later. But later was 3 days before the wedding, and his family had already made it clear there would be no fixing, only submission. When I pressed him to choose, his voice wavered. "I love you," he said, "but they're my family." That was the answer I needed. He had chosen them. My heart broke, but my resolve burned hotter than ever. Moments after hanging up, a new text buzzed onto my phone. It was from Heather Clark, Justin's ex, forwarded by Michelle. "Careful. Barretts don't keep strays long." It was proof Michelle had been pulling strings behind the scenes, trying to rattle me into walking away. Instead, she handed me ammunition. I forwarded the text to Kimberly. Her reply came fast. "Perfect. We'll use this. And Scott's dirt is ready. Offshore accounts, tax dodges, the works." Danielle doubled down with the latest valuation report. 3 million strong. You're untouchable. Angela's call sealed it. Justin knew. Dump him now. You don't need a man who won't fight for you. She was right. Love without respect wasn't love. It was a cage. That night, Kimberly and I sat in a diner booth with her leather portfolio open between us. She slid the counter prenup across to me, its clauses ironclad. Next to it was Scott's report, pages of financial skeletons that could make the Barrett empire tremble. We planned the meeting for the following evening at a lakefront restaurant, public enough to keep them civil, private enough for me to hit hard. As I drove home, I replayed the smug looks on their faces, the way Linda dismissed my parents, the way George barked orders, the way Michelle smirked like she had already won. They thought they had me cornered. What they didn't realize was that the girl they thought was powerless was about to flip their empire upside down. Tomorrow I wouldn't just defend myself. I would end this game and walk away on my own terms. The lakefront restaurant gleamed under the fading sun, its glass walls reflecting the dunes. I had chosen it carefully, elegant enough to match the Barrett's taste, but public enough to keep their arrogance in check. Kimberly sat beside me, her portfolio packed with the counter prenup and Scott's report. I wore a tailored black dress, sharp and unyielding, my aunt's sapphire earrings catching the light as a reminder of my roots. 10 minutes late, of course, the Barretts arrived. George's suit screamed power, Linda's silk gown whispered money, and Michelle's smirk carried the same venom as always. Justin trailed behind them, his tie slightly crooked, his face weary. "Olivia," Linda began, sliding into her seat. "Let's make this quick. Have you signed?" Her tone carried the confidence of someone who believed the deal was already sealed. Calmly, I pushed the counter prenup across the table. "Not your version. This one is fair. It protects both sides equally, and my company's intellectual property is off limits." George's brows furrowed as he flipped through it. Michelle laughed, dismissing me again. "What assets do you even have?" I looked her dead in the eye. 9 million. 6 from my aunt's estate, 3 from my company. I'm not the broke girl you thought I was. The table froze. Linda's glass stopped midair. Michelle's smirk dissolved. George's jaw tightened. Justin just sat there, stunned and silent. I didn't let the silence drag. I showed them Heather's text, forwarded by Michelle. "This is how your daughter tried to sabotage me," I said, locking eyes with Linda. For the first time, her composure cracked. Next, I laid down Scott's report, page after page of offshore accounts and tax evasion. George's face paled as he scanned it, his hands trembling despite his attempt at control. "This is inaccurate," he muttered, but the quiver in his voice betrayed him. Finally, I turned to Justin. "You knew about the prenup. You let them blindside me. You chose them over me." His eyes dropped to the table. He mumbled something about fixing it later, but it was too late. The choice had been made. I stood, Kimberly rising beside me, my voice firm. "The wedding is off. I'm walking away with my 9 million and my dignity." Their faces were a portrait of shock, Linda's disbelief, Michelle's outrage, George's fury, and Justin's regret. But I didn't waver. I walked out into the cool lake air, free. Later that night, Angela's voice steadied me over the phone. "You did right, Olivia. You're free now." Danielle texted that our app's numbers were climbing higher, and Kimberly called, laughing that George's firm was scrambling to cover their tracks. I sat in my modest apartment, my future wide open, and realized something profound. Wealth doesn't define you. Respect does. The Barretts thought they could control me, but they underestimated the woman who had already built her own empire. I wasn't their pawn. I was Olivia Brooks, and I would never compromise my worth again.